Hello and welcome back to the Movie Pope podcast. And today we are continuing with our tribute to Robert Redford, who passed away in September. We're reviewing, some of his most famous movies. Recently, we did a review of The Sting. The Robot did a review of The Last Castle, and today we are going to be taking a look at Out of Africa from 1985. And with me today is Art Arutyunyan, who is a filmmaker based out of Los Angeles, California. Art, how are you doing today?
Doing great. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll say this: like when I got the news that Robert Redford passed away, I knew right away I wanted to do a tribute series where we look at some of his movies. And given that we reviewed Cool Hand Luke, a few months ago, we were talking about the modern Western and everything. I was expecting you to say either The Horse Whisperer or Butch Cassidy or even 3 Days of the Condo or Condor, I should say.
Mhm.
But you recommended two movies, and one of them was Out of Africa, and I was kind of intrigued about Out of Africa. So what was it about this particular movie that made you think I want to take a look at that, because I think this is one of Robert Redford's best performances?
Mm. Yeah, well, the movie, as you alluded to earlier, is this lavish, gorgeous ode to the continent of Africa, right?
Hmm.
And as you watch the movie, you can feel it, you can see it, you can smell the fact that the filmmakers loved Africa, and it was shot on location in Kenya. So it's not, there are a couple of green screens I noticed, but they were not the African segments. They were more Netherlands, Swedish segments. I noticed they were like green
Yeah,
screens, but
Denmark. Yeah.
Denmark, yeah, sorry. But yeah, all the African scenes were shot in Africa, in Kenya, and it's just like a love song to Africa, in my opinion. And it's just a gorgeously made film. The sunsets are incredible. The landscapes are incredible. All these ultra wide shots. I mean, it's just out of this world.
So, so since we are talking about the legacy of Robert Redford, we've reviewed a couple of his movies so far. But what I find interesting about Out of Africa is the fact that Meryl Streep takes front and center. She plays, the Baroness, right?
Yeah.
And who would go on to later write this book Out of Africa, which will later be adapted as a film in '85. But so Robert Redford, he pops in occasionally, right?
Mhm.
He's not front and center like you would see in The Last Castle or All the President's Men or Butch Cassidy or any of the other films. So, what is it about Out of Africa that, in your opinion, would say best exemplifies Robert Redford's talents as an actor?
That's a good question. I think this role particular in here, where he plays Dennis, the big game hunter, is to me personally, the quintessential Robert Redford performance, because to me he tends to be very subtle in most of his roles. He's rarely explosive or showy. His performances are very subtle. It's almost like at the first glance he's not doing anything,
Hmm.
and I think exemplifies his approach to acting. It's very, again, I don't know what's going on through his head. He's probably exploding, and a lot of things are going through.
Yeah, yeah.
But the way he is on screen, it's very subtle. Again, like you can barely see the work, but I think that's the beauty of it.
Hmm.
He just becomes this character, and you don't even think twice.
So, when you compare to other movies like Butch Cassidy, for instance, where if he's not front and center, he's sharing the screen with Paul Newman, another
Hmm.
great icon. Um,
Right.
I mean, I mean, do you see the same level of subtlety, or is he a bit more overt in those movies than he is here in Out of Africa?
Yeah, he's definitely much quieter here, definitely. But I think he knows the assignment. He gets the assignment. Not unlike Paul Newman, also who also gets this, understands the film, understands his place in the film, and
Yeah.
understands his character's role his character's place in the film. And he kind of provides that quieter, more stable, more confident partner to Meryl Streep's performance that goes through a lot of different things in this film. And I think he brings that balance, and he kind of anchors her in a way too. That anchors Meryl Streep's character in the film as well. I think that's probably the difference between those two films as far as his
Yeah.
performance.
Well, also too, because because I think with the exception of The Way We Were and The Horse Whisperer, we really don't see Robert Redford as the romantic lead, really,
Mhm.
because because for me anyway, whenever we think of Robert Redford, he's usually doing these, like, I wouldn't say action, movies, but they're like adventure films, right? Like he's always doing something. Even in All the President's Men, it's him and Dennis Hoffman. They're doing something, right? They're trying to do something that is heroic. So, like in the case of All the President's Men, as Bob Woodward, he's out trying to uncover what happened at the Watergate hotel
Mhm.
that
Right.
led to the break-in. Dennis, for the most part in this movie, it's, to your point, he's very subtle because he pops in here and there. We really we don't quite know what's going on with him. And I just so to start off, Meryl Streep plays the Baroness Karen Dennison. She was a Danish aristocrat, and she marries the brother of a guy she really likes, and she ends up going to Africa in 1913. And the first encounter we have between Dennis and Karen is when he's unloading ivory onto the train, and I thought that was a bit jarring
Mhm.
in that scene. But even but even in that moment, like he's just like there's something about him. There's like this magnetism, this charisma, right?
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
and throughout the movie, like I'll say this. So like so as he appears more and more in the film, like you get the feeling like this is someone who is starting to make an impression on Karen, because for starters, when she first meets him, this is an ordinary, like, hunter guy. Like he's just given some ivory because I think her husband bought the ivory, right?
Mm.
He bought the
Yeah,
ivory, and she's just supposed to take it over to him.
yeah.
So I want to start off and get your take on this, because Out of Africa is a visually stunning movie. Like 19 it, like is made 1985, so long before CGI became the thing that it is today, where anybody with a laptop can do CGI.
Right.
And another thing too, I mean, let's also keep in mind that this is set, in during the colonial period,
Mhm.
in basically a colonized Africa,
Mhm.
where every European country has like their own little toehold on the continent.
Yeah.
So the first thing that comes to mind, and I want to get your take on this because you were a fashion designer and you're a filmmaker, is the setting and the costuming.
Mhm.
Like what what are your thoughts on the way that the characters, everybody from Dennis to Karen to to even the Maasai tribes out there, like what are your thoughts on the way that it was, so because it's carefully choreographed too, like nothing's
Oh yeah.
accidental.
Oh yeah. I mean, brilliantly directed by Sidney Pollack. I mean, he's done some great work,
Mm.
and that's probably one of his better ones. I mean, masterfully staged and framed. Every frame is beautiful. I mean, how can you not? I mean, in Africa with all these landscapes, and all this rich culture, how can you not? And he really captures all of that as a director. To kind of answer to what you're saying about the settings, yeah, absolutely. You're thrown into this world. You kind of follow. You kind of see the trajectory through her Karen Blixen's, the Baroness Karen Blixen's eyes. She arrives into this country that she doesn't know much about. She's never seen. And she's when she steps down that train, you can see her in her eyes like, what is this place? What are these people? Where am I? And she's
She's no longer
wearing
in Kansas, so
right, exactly. And she's wearing one of her better dresses with a hat, and you can gradually kind of trace the transition where her dresses are becoming less constricted. They're less. There's no structure anymore. She's wearing softer dresses as we progress, and her hats are becoming simpler. and become more practical. It's not just for beauty, but it's for practicality to protect herself from the sun. So you could gradually kind of see how she changes her wardrobe, and it also a metaphor for her being liberated, right, from all these like old world rules and constrictions. As a woman, you have to be married. You cannot be on your own. You have to be with a husband. So it's a kind of metaphor as well for that.
Yeah.
And I think they brilliantly used it. The wardrobe designer and production design, they brilliantly used all those elements to enhance her storyline and the character's arc in this film. I do like the wardrobe in this because it doesn't it's not very showy, which I think fits the story, but you can tell if you sit down, you can tell the craftsmanship and the beauty, especially in her earlier dresses that she brings with her from Europe, and all the china and all the crystal that she's worried about
Yeah.
at first, and then until one of them says, I know what china is, it breaks.
Yeah.
So I love it. Yeah.
Another thing too, because what I will say too is that there is this wonderful contrast because you remember the opening shot where she's in Denmark, right?
Yeah.
It's in the middle of winter, it's snow and everything. It's stark. It's very black and white if you
Mm.
think about it. And then you come to Africa and it's like this warm, colorful place. It's just rich with greens and browns and blues and everything and
Yeah.
red. Can what are your thoughts on the contrast between Denmark, where Karen is living, to Africa, to where she ends up, not only making it her home, but kind of falling in love with the people over there.
Yeah, I think you can feel it, right? Like you were saying, in Europe, where she starts from, is it's very constricted. It's all driven by rules. She's a slave to rules, there's like a hint of her being a free spirit when she finds out that her husband has been cheating on her all this time, and now she decides to marry his brother. And we kind of know that she has an ambition of being a baroness, and that's why she wants to marry one of these brothers.
Mhm.
She wants to marry the second brother because she wants to keep her status. But she also has something else to offer to them, which is her money. So there's like this exchange, and very sort of like capitalistic early European kind of metaphor.
Mhm.
And once she arrives to Africa, rules are different. There's no rules. They have their own rules, or there are no rules. It's more like connection to nature and more organic, and they're not burdened by all this old world stuff. They're not chained to it. There's far more freedom in there. So I think yeah, you could feel that contrast, and it also helps the character's arc as well.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
and she grows through it.
Also too, to your point, because I think the first person who kind of introduces her to this world is Felicity. Um,
Mm,
and
mm,
and I think it's so interesting too, because remember when she meets Felicity, it's at the wedding party, and Felicity, she looks like she just came back from a hunt, really. Like
right.
she's wearing,
Yes.
if you couldn't tell by her hair and her voice, you would have thought she was just one of the guys, really.
Hmm.
Do you what are your thoughts on the fact that even the women there, like the European women over there, they kind of have to shed their, and you alluded to this earlier, they shed their feminine attire because they kind of have to man up in a way
Yeah,
in order to survive in Africa.
absolutely. It's like being in the wilderness somewhere where there's just no place for that old world BS anymore, right?
Hmm.
Like you said, survival. You have to survive. So everything around you needs to serve that. It needs to serve that survival. If you want to thrive in a place like Africa, you need to adapt. You need to get tougher. Yeah, forget about makeup, forget about your fancy hats. You need to know how to ride the horse. You need to know how to shoot the rifle. You need to be ready for a lion crawling out of bushes at any moment. So yeah, and Felicity, as you were saying, that's kind of like a first glimpse of what's to come for her. Scratches on her face, sweating, the hair is not done. She's just wearing practical hat and riding boots and pants. Yeah, absolutely. I love that kind of brief introduction.
Because also remember, yeah, because I was gonna say, because you remember later on, Felicity and Karen have a heart to heart,
Mm.
and Karen's like, well, should I get married? Like, I know everybody's saying, well, that's what you're supposed to do, but is that something that you're supposed to do? Like, I do want to,
Mm.
I do want to, fit in, but I don't want to do it the way that people have always done it,
Yeah, she said, I want the men to notice me, but I also want them to leave me alone. So it's so it's kind of like walking that line, we all want, we all want to be, desired and wanted, but we also want to keep our freedom a little bit. And I think it kind of explains the dynamic between Karen and Denys as well. He wants his freedom, yet he's committed to her. He said, we can mate for life, but I cannot be here all the time. I need to go away. Whereas she at some point tells him, I need I need something more concrete. It's a very
Yeah.
interesting, very interesting theme. I think which is relevant forever and it will always be relevant. It's a very relevant theme to explore. How do you maintain who you are and keep your freedom while being in a committed relationship to someone or being in love with someone?
And it actually transitions to a really, really nice point about Dennis, because Dennis is this. I guess you could say he's a sort of carefree hunter, right? He's at his element where he's out in the bush and he's just doing all these things. He's just stalking animals, and and I think at one point I think he even says he's going to like start a service where he guides people around, and one of his clients is a Belgian nobleman. But but that exchange where they have later on, where Karen talks about marriage and she wants to marry him, I kind of feel like even though Karen is starting to accept that maybe the stuff that she did in Denmark doesn't really apply to where she is in Africa, she doesn't really let go of it. You know what I mean?
Right, right. I mean, it's like, the whole thing, the marriage and relationships are in our DNA, in our genes. They're so deep, the thousands of years of traditions and stuff. It's hard to shake off, even though she does her best, right? And she gets lets go of a lot of all those rules. But she does. I noticed that she does talk, especially in the voiceover, when she does voiceover.
Hmm.
She does talk about how lonely it gets there. She feels isolated. She feels lonely, even though she's surrounded by her farmers and her help. There's a lot of people around her. She does feel isolated and lonely. So I think that comes from that place of being lonely. If he marries her, then she won't be so lonely. She said, "I want to have someone of my own," and that whole, old world idea of if you're married to someone, you have someone, even though they're not there.
Right, right. But Dennis also makes the point that because Karen always saying it's my farm, it's my
Mhm.
house, and all that stuff, and Dennis points out, well, is it really yours? Like, because he keeps saying my, and that makes no
Mhm.
sense. Um, I will say this too: the way that the dynamic between Meryl Streep and Robert Redford in that movie is phenomenal, right? Because
Oh
it's
yeah.
not, and I think we've been spoiled by modern Hollywood where everything has to be sexualized, right?
Mhm.
Like, as soon as two characters meet, they have to take off their clothes and engage in intimacy right away, which
Right.
kind of cheapens everything, because it takes away the playfulness that you could have with these characters.
Yeah.
So as a filmmaker, when you're watching the interactions between Karen and Dennis and their growing relationship, and as they interact, are there any cues, or is there anything that stands out to you that you feel is very important and maybe influential on your work as a filmmaker?
I mean, it's definitely a good lesson on how to build tension without, like you said, putting them actually together, without them touching each other or kissing. But you can sense the tension.
Hmm.
You can tell right away that she's attracted to him because he's so opposite of her. He's very free. He's not burdened by all these rules and constrictions.
Hmm.
And he's also attracted to her, but because I think he sees something in her that she doesn't see in herself yet. And when she first tells them that story that she just made up on the fly, right? The whole
Yeah,
story.
about
He
the
was,
Chinaman. Yeah.
yeah. And he's really impressed by how intelligent and how creative she is, because he reads a lot of books and he's attached to his books. So he he's attracted to that part of her as well, besides being beautiful and all that stuff. But
Yeah,
I think
she's
at the,
spontaneous. Yeah.
yeah, exactly, right. Yeah, she has this imagination that she hasn't explored yet at that moment. So he's attracted to that. But as you were saying, it's they're not touching each other. There's just looks and this around like a mild flirtation. She doesn't even know that he's flirting with her, and then he's attracted to her as well because she's this fresh breath of air, and very intelligent and beautiful. And I think it's a great lesson on how to build tension without showing them obvious.
Yeah, and I would even say too, because it's something that I've noticed with a lot of Robert Redford's movies. He's very playful. He's
Mm,
not he's not someone who is going to come out and just do something. Like he's going to your point, he's very subtle, and he kind of just
mm,
draws things out very slowly, right?
mm,
So like for example in The Sting, where where he and Paul Newman, they kind of play off each other, right? It's like it's almost as if these two guys are sharing the same mind.
mm.
That's sort of the same impression that I get when I watch the interaction between Karen and Dennis, is because essentially they share the same mind, because they're both, to your point, they're both very much attracted to each other. But it's also this idea that they complete each other as well, right?
Mm.
Because with Karen and her husband Bror, they don't. There's really nothing there, right? It's
Yeah,
just convenience.
right.
So, and I feel bad for her too, because she wants to make that relationship work so bad,
Yes.
you
Yeah,
know?
she does. Yeah, even though it's a transactional marriage, right? It's an arranged marriage in a way, right? She
Yeah.
still wants to make it work. She still wants to be in love with him. She still wants him to be in love with her. Yeah, but with Dennis, it's different.
Yeah, because with her and Dennis, it's organic,
Hmm.
really. Because and and let me know what your thoughts on this too, because initially Karen just seems, she really just wants to be, a member of the nobility, right?
Mm.
So if they're telling her, well, you can be a baroness, but you got to go to Africa to do it,
Hmm.
she's like, well, all right, I'll suck it up for a few months. I'll go
Yeah,
to Africa and I'll
yeah.
do it. But with Dennis, it's like, well, it's almost as if she just tosses everything to the wayside and just goes for it, really, because to your point, it's this freedom that she's not confined to the social norms and conventions of Europe. She's on another continent. She is with different people. She can she can sort of explore herself, right?
Hmm.
So do we really? So and this is something that I was asking as the movie ended. Did Karen ever really find out who she really is? Is she the
Hmm.
Baroness, or is she this person who is fighting for the right? Well, I don't say fighting for the rights, but she's advocating for the Maasai people who live on her plantation, or is she like this woman who just wants to be with Dennis, and that's good for her? Like, who is she really?
Right, right. I think that's the brilliance of this script and brilliance of the film is that by the end of the film, we know who she was meant to be. Her priorities change, her objectives change. As you were saying, she wanted to have that title, and she wanted to have the marriage, all the traditional stuff.
Mhm.
Um, but by the end, we can see that her desires and her objectives have changed. She wants to protect these people that helped her. She lost everything. I mean, even when she loses her farm, um, she doesn't really grieve it. I didn't see it. I think she just valued what she learned from it as opposed to how much wealth she gained. Like I didn't feel like she was really grieving it. Yeah, she was like, "Well, I don't have coffee anymore, but I can give you some tea," you know.
Yeah.
And I think that's a great character development, a great script by Kurt Liedtke. Um, that's how you write that kind of character that comes from having these ambitions and goals to be part of the high society, but then is brought to a place where she's fish out of water and has to learn that these are the things that matter: love, people, humanity, helping each other. those are the things that really matter at the end of the day, and not wealth or titles or marriage.
Yeah, and another thing too is because and I'm not I don't know if you picked up on this, but at one point I think she like contracts a disease. I think they said it was syphilis, right?
Yeah, right.
And she had to take like arsenic to like treat it, which I thought was a bit weird. And
Mhm.
then later on, I think she either reveals it to Dennis or to her husband that she can't have children. Like
To
she's
both,
physically,
yeah.
yes, she's physically unable to have kids. So I
Yeah.
think I think with that revelation, that kind of to your point, it kind of has her shift her priorities, because if she
Hmm.
can't have kids, then she's got to like project her energy away from motherhood to something else, right?
Yep. Yep. Another one of those rules that she had to let go. She
Hmm.
wanted to have kids, have a proper family. It was taken away from her, not by her doing, but because of somebody else. And she had to let that go. Yeah, absolutely. And she started that school and for local kids, kind of like created her own
Yeah,
a replacement for having kids.
yeah, but yeah, they became her family when she couldn't have her own.
Right.
So so obviously this is a Robert Redford tribute. We want look at the movies of Robert Redford.
Yes.
I do want to focus on the character of Dennis, because like I said, when we first meet Dennis, he's delivering ivory, and as he kind of like pops in and out of Karen's life,
Mhm.
he's very much this he's very much this carefree guy. To your point, he's very much just loves being a free spirited guy.
Yeah.
Um, we know that the character is based on the actual Dennis, from the book, and he's an
Yeah.
Englishman.
Right.
But I kind of find it curious that you have Robert Redford playing the character, and
Hmm.
I think I remember reading at one point he tried to do it in an English accent, but they're like, nah, so, no, we're
Right.
just gonna have you do your regular accent. Like, what did
Right.
you? What are your thoughts on that? Do you feel like maybe Robert Redford was miscast in this, or do you feel like he was perfect in spite of the fact that he wasn't talking like all the other English characters, like Michael Gove and Michael Kitchen and all those other people?
Right. I think with this particular performance, it kind of becomes secondary. Yeah, I did question it. How come he's just speaks in his own American accent? Maybe they tried it, like you said, and they didn't like how it sounded, or it was just not helping him. Maybe it was hindering his performance, which is possible. When you adopt a different accent, it kind of changes the way you analyze the phrases. Who
Yeah.
knows? I don't know. But I think it's kind of secondary what accent he speaks for this particular performance. But I like that he kind of takes on this a trope, right? This free-spirited guy with his skill that's connected to nature, and he battles these beasts, and he comes and goes whenever he pleases. He never even tells her, "Oh, I'm going to leave in a week." He just says, "I'm leaving tomorrow." You know, that's
Yeah.
it's a kind of a tropey character. But the what's different about this particular one, first, it's because it's played by Robert Redford, who just does that subtle thing so masterfully and beautifully. You just
Yeah.
believe everything he say. And another thing, what they had added to the character, whether it's a book or script, I'm not sure when the change was made, is that he does tell her that when he commits to someone, he commits for life. Like he gave an example of geese or whatever animals that commit
Yeah.
for life. Because if they stay true to the trope of this kind of free spirited character that comes and goes, they don't really commit to anyone. They just go with the flow. There's this person and there's that person. But he did tell her that he has that in him to commit to one person.
Right. And
Interesting.
yeah, and to your point too, because because he's willing to commit, but he's not willing to commit in the conventional sense, you know,
Yeah.
because he and Karen, they have that altercation about marriage,
Hmm.
and I thought it was so brilliant the way that that Robert Redford just plays it off, because you know because throughout the movie he almost has this facade of someone who is like carefree, and he doesn't care what people think, and if you want to call him this, it just goes over his head because he doesn't care.
Hmm.
But I think in that particular scene, in that exchange, I think that really really hits him right there. You know,
Hmm.
because because here's someone who he loves, someone who he genuinely cares about, and 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 he even says, I've never infringed on your freedom. You could do whatever you want.
Hmm.
Why are you trying to do that to me? Why are you trying to take away my freedom? Like, and
Hmm.
and as a guy, I even said, well, yeah, that's pretty much the argument between men and women. Like in any relationship is, how is it that you can impose these expectations on me, but if I put the same on you, well, God forbid, like that's a deal breaker. Like,
Yeah.
what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's such a good scene too, because in that moment, we kind of learn that it's not only her learning from him, he learns from her as well. That there is, that perhaps his way is not gonna last forever. He cannot maintain this kind of way of living forever. He probably can, but it will come at a price at some point. Like everything else in life, honestly, every lifestyle we choose comes with sacrifices and a price. And I
Yeah,
like that scene because in that moment, I feel like she teaches him not only about herself but about himself as well, and I like that. I think it just it just proves that these characters are not two-dimensional, and he has his weaknesses too. He has his downfalls too. He's always lonely, even though he doesn't admit it. He's always in nature hunting these beasts, but and that airplane is a great metaphor.
yeah,
They
yes,
ask him, "Where did you learn? When did you learn how to fly?" Yesterday, and he's already flying it. Not only himself, but also taking her with him, which
yeah.
is careless, to be honest. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But to your point about about Karen teaching Dennis as well as her learning from him, I kind of get the feeling there's a bit of of almost like a childlike quality to Dennis, really,
Hmm.
because
Yeah.
because because think about it. I mean, Dennis is he's popping in and out. He, like you said, he never, like, sometimes he doesn't announce when he's leaving. Like, he just goes, right, which is
Yeah.
something that when you're younger, you can do whatever you please. You come and go as you please,
Right.
and you feel like you can have it both ways, or as they say, have your cake and eat it too.
Yeah.
Karen, Karen kind of comes in and just says, well, that's not really how it works in the real world, and
Yeah.
and I'll say too, because as much as I agree with Dennis on some of his points, at the same time I feel like, well, surely you must have known that. Like, I
Mhm.
mean, you're a grown man. Like, surely someone must have knocked you on the head and told you about this at some
Yeah.
point. I figured Cole would have mentioned it too, but Cole is off just doing his own thing as well. You
Mhm.
know?
Right, right, right. Yeah, it's like like a child avoiding responsibilities, right? I'm not tied to anything. I don't have responsibility to anyone or anything. I just come and please as I go. But the time will come where he'll have to face the fact that there is such thing as responsibility. Constantly floating and going with the flow, has its price as well.
And I think the real tragedy too, because we come to find out that Dennis dies in a plane crash, right?
Yeah, right.
I think the real tragedy for me was we never really got to see if Dennis really took those lessons to heart and kind of you
Mm,
know followed through on it too. Because
right, right.
and I want to get your thoughts on this too, because when Karen when Karen and Dennis have that exchange, he walks away and the relationship kind of ends at that point, right?
Yeah.
Because they were pretty much having fun, just going out on safari and doing all that stuff. But then after
Mhm.
that exchange, you kind of have this feeling that Dennis hears it, but but he's not listening, right?
Yeah, yeah. He kind of stays who he is in a way.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So do you think had he not died in that plane crash, do you think maybe he would have taken what Karen said to heart, or do you think he probably would have just gone on and kept doing what he was doing?
You know what? I almost feel like they might have considered that version too. you know,
Yeah.
because because especially 1985, they were thinking about what the audiences would prefer in the ending, and the majority of people prefer happy ending, especially in these kind of epic love stories, right? In the end, we have to see that they're come together and they're live happily ever after.
Yeah.
But I'm happy that they kind of kept it this way, so it's a little bit more unique in a way.
Yeah, and I'll say this too, because out of all the Robert Redford movies I've seen so far, right, I would say that this is probably Robert Redford, you know, playing a character who's immature, who is on the cusp of immaturity, right?
Mm,
Or sorry, on the cusp of maturity, I should say,
mm, hmm.
because in the Sting, for instance, he's immature. He's a grifter. He's going around. He's cheating people out of their money, and then he takes part in this big grift to basically
Mm,
steal money from a mob boss. But then by the end of the movie, he kind of keeps going back to doing what he's doing. Um,
yeah.
but but in something like Out of Africa, it's like you kind of have to ask the question, what could have been or what might have been, right?
Hmm.
Could he have been, the man that Karen wanted him to be? In which case, would he have been the same Dennis? Because at that point, he would have to change who he was at his core to be the man that Karen wanted him to be,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah, 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 absolutely. But
So,
I
oh,
do,
go ahead.
yes, you're comparing this to films. Absolutely, yeah. He's kind of a grifter here too, and the only responsibility he has is to his work, right? His process, hunting this beasts, which comes with a lot of knowledge and skill, and you have to approach it with precision and responsibility, right? Because otherwise you get eaten,
Yeah, exactly.
or your clients, yeah, or your clients get eaten.
He wouldn't have lasted that long if that was the case.
Right, right, right. So maybe it's the case of I can only handle this one thing. I can only be responsible to just this one thing. It's
Yeah.
hard enough, Why do I need to be married?
Well, I also want to talk. I also want to compare to Cool Hand Luke, a movie that we
Mm,
reviewed a few months ago, because
right.
in that movie we see Lucas Jackson, who's very much he's very much this immature kid also,
Yeah.
because as you'll remember, like he starts off the movie just chopping up the heads of all the parking meters, and
Hmm.
and when he's in that prison, he just takes it on the chin. He just doesn't know when to give up, and that's what makes him so endearing.
Mm.
Here you could sort of see, Robert Redford kind of channeling a little bit of Paul Newman in there, because
Sure.
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's not doing anything stupid like decapitating parking meters or anything like that, but there's something childlike about him that I think I think Karen is drawn to, right?
Hmm.
Because
Yep.
because that scene, to go back where they're at the dinner, and he says, "Oh, so you can tell any story," and she's like, "Yeah, someone just needs to start me off," and he's just so enthralled by it, and like when I see his expressions, like that's the way that a child really reacts when someone's telling a story. They're
Right.
drawn into that.
Yeah, I agree 100%. Childlike, naive, not necessarily naive, but there's certain innocence to him. Maybe just like a conscious rejection of the
Yeah,
rules and the society,
yeah,
just
rebellious kind of.
rebellious. Exactly, yeah. And I think comparison with Cool Hand Luke is great as well. I feel like there's in every generation there's this actor who gravitates towards those roles. The rebel, the childlike persona to a character. And I think Paul Newman was that. Robert Redford was that. Um, I'm still yet to see the new generation. um,
Well, tell me what you think about this, because last week when we did a review of The Sting, we were speculating about if they had to remake that movie for
mm,
2025 or 2026, who would be casting the lead roles of Gondorf and Hooker, and we both said Austin Butler and Timothy Chalamet, right?
mm,
And I was just thinking probably I think out of all the actors in Hollywood today, I think Austin Butler might be. I wouldn't say he is, but I think he would be the closest or the most reasonable choice to kind of play that cocky,
Yeah.
immature yet magnetic character.
Yeah. Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Now that I'm kind of running the roles that he's done so far, he does. Yeah. He played a biker at some point. Yeah. He has that, I guess, taste and gravitate towards those roles as well.
So for me, when I watch Out of Africa, it's not it's not something that I would automatically think of as a Robert Redford movie, right?
Mm.
I would
Yeah.
see it more as like a Meryl Streep movie, and
Mhm.
rightly so, because Meryl Streep, she does a phenomenal job in playing this character who's very naive, who comes to Africa not knowing what the rules are, because even though when there are no rules, there are rules, right?
Yeah.
But to your point, it's also very much a Robert Redford movie, because as you said, Robert Redford is very subtle. He's not on the nose. Like he slowly kind of works his way into the characters' lives and has an impact on them,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
Because by the end of the movie, Karen, obviously she's not thinking about her at that point, her ex-husband, because he's long gone from her mind. And
Mhm.
you remember when she's sitting alone in that house, um, and he comes in and he tells her that Denys died in the plane crash.
Mhm.
She has a very blank expression on her face, right?
Mhm.
Because yeah, I mean, he's her ex-husband and he cheated on her and everything, but you would expect like a sort of warmth or some sort of like familiar expression on her face, like,
Right.
oh, it's you. But
Right.
she's very cold towards him.
Right. Yeah. I think that at that point she outgrown him in a way, where she was kind of fighting for him in the beginning, but now she knows that she's experienced now that's something that's more profound with Denys than what she had with her husband.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah, and the fact that and the fact that Denys has this huge impact on her life, it's like
Hmm.
you. I kind of had to. I kind of had to rewind some back to some scenes, because as I'm watching the movie, I'm thinking, wait, when did this happen? Like when did all of a sudden they begin to grow this close to one another? Because it's just, again, to your point, it's so subtle that
Hmm. Yeah.
like you just accept it and you don't really think about it, because Robert Redford just has this personality. I mean, it's the same with Paul Newman. It's that magnetism that not only draws the characters in, but it kind of draws the audience in. You know?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, movie star. That's a movie star quality where someone like Robert Redford seemingly doesn't have to do much for you to pay attention to what he's saying and watching, just kind of lose yourself in his eyes, and
Mhm.
every expression is there, everything you need is there, without doing a lot of acting, quote unquote.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what movie stars are, definitely.
Well, I would even say I think that's the mark of a really good actor.
Yep,
Really, it,
definitely that
it
too. Yep.
yeah, because you mentioned when we did Cool Hand Luke, there's this particularly distinctive style that Paul Newman had, was the smile, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything in particular about Robert Redford that stands out? Like when he's in these movies, they kind of stands out to you, just like the smile, or is it a bit more subtle?
Yeah, it's not as big as smile, but it's definitely a smirk, or his eyes, something in his eyes. It's like a twinkle in
Yes.
his eyes. There's a little like mischievous, which fits the character in this particular film. Which I know something. I have a secret, that kind of twinkle in his eye.
And it's funny you say that, because I watched The Last Castle earlier this week, and when he's playing Eugene Irwin, right? Again, he doesn't say much. He's just standing in the prison yard, arms behind his back, but he's staring, he's looking. And I feel like if Paul Newman had the smile, right, I think it's the stare, or I should say the
Mm.
gaze. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, let's call it the gaze that Robert Redford has. And I would even say, like, depending on the role that he's playing, in any movie, if it's The Sting, when he gives that look, it's like, huh, like he's sizing someone up to see like what if they can grift. Or in Out of Africa, he's looking at someone to see, like, can I trust this person? Do I like them? Or in The Last Castle, when he like looks out the prison yard, he's thinking to himself like, what can I do to whip these prisoners into shape, right?
Mhm.
So with Paul Newman's smile, it's this is sort of mischievous devil may care kind of thing. Like, you can beat me down, but I'm just going to smile at the world.
Mhm.
Whereas whereas with Robert Redford, the gaze is almost it can be readjusted to whatever situation he's in.
Right. And that's a mark of um, an actor who understands more than just his part in the film. He understands cinema. He understands what the film is about. He understands the tone of the film. I think when actors see big picture as well, how things are made, where the camera is, and what the angle is, and and how it's going to be cut, they understand all of that. They
Hmm.
can really like you said, utilize whatever tools they have, which in this instance is the gaze, the eyes. They can definitely play that up to the utmost effect.
So here's something that I was thinking about, and I want to ask you today. So in his other films, Redford is pretty much confined to like a certain location or certain space, right? So whether it's 1930s Chicago or it's Washington D.C. or a prison yard, he's kind of confined into like a certain spot. And he has to kind of work with that. Here he has all of Kenya, if not most of East Africa at his disposal. Do you think do you think, given the expanse of the setting that he's in, do you think the role for him is a bit more challenging, or do you think that kind of gives him more freedom to kind of work with what he's got, given the greater scope of the landscape in which the movie and the characters are set?
Mm. I would imagine it's a little bit of both, Again, the actor's process, every actor I spoke to, it's such a personal thing. You never really ask actors how they arrive, where they arrive, and how they develop the role,
Mhm.
because they don't like answering that question because it's very personal. So but from my perspective, what I see in a performance is that it's probably a little bit of both, and he chooses where he needs to restrain himself and where he lets go a little bit. I think it's both. It's a little bit of both. But I would imagine, being in Africa, being on set in Africa, surrounded by all this landscape and the literally zebra here and hippos here and then giraffes and lions. The lions were trained, I hope. It
Yeah.
it kind of puts you in that mindset that you're part of something much, much, much bigger, and yeah, you need to know your place.
Well, I would even add too, because I think out of all the movies, with Redford, he kind of has to transition between one Africa and the other, right? Because
Mm.
obviously you have the Africa of the bush, with the lions and
Mhm.
the animals and all that stuff, where where he kind of develops his character to fit in that environment, right? So
Mhm.
so when he and Karen, they go out into on safari, and they go and they're just sitting on the campfire at night, he's more open, he's more free. Whereas when he's when he's at the plantation, or if he's at those parties, he's a bit more closed up, because you remember the New
Yeah.
Year, what, I forget if it was New Year's or if they're celebrating the end of the war.
Mhm.
He's just sitting there all by himself, and
Right.
he's got like a glass and a champagne bottle. Like, he's not interacting with anybody. He's very closed, as it
Mhm.
were. You know
Right.
how
Right.
how did you feel about the way that he kind of transitions between you know between characters, as someone out in the open, as someone who's in a closed and confined space?
Mhm. Yeah. Now that you said that, definitely. Now that I'm replaying the scenes in my head, he definitely is more restricted among the Europeans. In the buildings and the parties, and the things that he wears too. They're a little more buttoned up. Kind of like he feels probably lonelier with these people than out there in the
Hmm.
bush surrounded by wild animals.
Well, I don't know if you picked up on this too, but also when he's among people, he he really doesn't care. he really doesn't care about the way he looks, right? Yeah, in Africa they kind of dress a little bit differently because they know that it's a lot warmer, and and obviously if they dress if they dress to the nines like they do in Europe, it's not going to really work in their favor, like you said earlier.
Right.
But you also get the feeling that he really doesn't care about how he looks too, and and the way that he's put together is is immaculate, right? Because it looks like something out of a LL Bean or Banana Republic, ad, but
Right.
so to us, to modern eyes, it looks kind of formal, really, or at least very smart casual. But at that time, it would kind of be the equivalent of him wearing a t-shirt and a flannel shirt everywhere he goes.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah, the uniform of a hunter, I guess. Yeah, he wears the vests and the trousers. Absolutely.
So, Art, I just want to thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to come on and talk about Out of Africa. Real quickly, if there's one aspect of Out of Africa that you think is striking and is very memorable, what would that be?
I would say number one thing is chemistry between Meryl Streep and Robert Redford. I think they play off really well with each other. I think they balance out each other. Her performance is more dynamic and more explosive at times. More, she's a powerhouse. He's more of a powerhouse that's quieter and more subtle. You can almost miss it if you don't pay attention. I think that's my favorite part. Second is the setting. I mean, it's incredible. The landscapes, the way it's framed, and it's beautiful.
I was gonna say the sets are just so beautifully constructed too, and I'll even add, I really like the fact that they include the Native Africans in there as well, right? Because it makes it more believable, it makes it more lived in. It's not like it kind of. Did you ever see the movie Fitzcarraldo? From what was it, 82 or something? It had it was by Werner Herzog, and it was set in South America.
Yeah, you know what? I saw it long time ago. Yeah, they utilized a lot of locals.
Yeah, that's what it reminded me of, because the way that everything is set up, like it's just it kind of follows a similar pattern of thought, because the aesthetics in that movie is kind of similar to what we see Out of Africa. Now, obviously, Fitzcarraldo is a bit different because because the lead character there, he's dressed in white, and you just think to yourself, man, what are you doing? You're out in the middle of the Amazon. Right. But you kind of get the same feeling. This is a fish out of water kind of story where they're trying to figure out how to survive there.
Right. Absolutely. That's a good comparison. Definitely.
Excellent. Well, Art, I just want to thank you so much for taking time to be on to talk about Out of Africa. It's been really great, my friend, and I really hope to have you back on for future episodes. And I just want to thank everybody for taking time to watch this episode. Let us know down in the comments below what your favorite Robert Redford movie was, and if you enjoyed Out of Africa. And as always, thanks for tuning in. We'll catch you in the next one.